The LA Lakers are having a bad time, and it looks like changes are coming for the Lakers this season. We're getting all kinds of reports about unhappiness with the coaching staff, unhappiness with the general roster by LeBron. This feels like a team that is ready to make some moves. Now, more specifically, the report that we've gotten most recently is that the roster and the locker room is very frustrated with Darvin Ham as head coach, not necessarily in terms of his acumen as a coach, but because there hasn't been any consistency. He's constantly changing the starting unit. He's playing, one game he's playing a ton of bigs in the starting unit. The next game he's playing a ton of smalls. The rotation is all over the place, and it's a huge concern for this team because on a LeBron team, you're always going to feel a little bit uneasy. You're always going to feel like you have a week of bad games and he's going to trade you. When you add to that a coach that feels like he's trying to find answers, it can really, provide you the sense of uneasiness constantly, and that certainly is not healthy for a team that's going to go through this, super long season, needs to build some camaraderie. And we've been kind of anticipating the entire season, even before the season, that this was a Lakers team that was always going to make some kind of move at the deadline. Just the way that they structured D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura contract added up perfectly to some potential star trades that we're going to talk about throughout the video, but it feels like it's happening maybe earlier than we had anticipated. And here's the biggest issue for the Lakers for the entire video, right? Is you might not think Darvin Ham is a great head coach, that's fine. You might not think that the roster is all that good, that's fine. You might not think that he's making the correct decisions with that roster, that's fine. This is a 500 or worse basketball team right now. And if you had told Lakers fans that before the season, they would assume that Bron or AD were missing some time or weren't playing particularly well. Those guys have been not only pretty available, but really good. And Austin Reeves has been solid, and they're still right around a 500 team. And if I was a Lakers fan, that's the thing that would concern me the most. It's not like you go into the season with the supporting cast of D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to go and win 55 games. But if Bron and AD are as available as they have been and playing as well as they have been, and you're still right around 500, that's where the concern starts to set in. Now, for me, I'm not overly concerned about the Lakers. They've kind of, over the last couple of seasons, become like the Heat of the West without as much playoff success. Like, they're just always going to be involved at the end of the year. With LeBron and AD, they're always going to, be part of the conversation. And I certainly think that at the deadline, they're going to look to explore a lot of different moves. First and foremost, Zach LaVine appears to be on their list of guys that they would like to try and add. Makes a lot of sense for their roster as a perimeter creator, as someone that takes a lot of the offensive responsibility away from LeBron. And on a night in which Austin Reeves isn't playing particularly well, he can just come off the bench. Zach LaVine can start alongside Bron, AD, a couple, defenders and shooters, and that can be your team. I personally not a huge Zach LaVine guy, on the contract and on some of the injury stuff that he's dealt with this year. He's only recently coming back from injury, so that wouldn't be my favorite move of all time, but there's some connections there to the Lakers, and it's been something that's been rumored for a while. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did, matching salaries and a couple of seconds or something. It wouldn't honestly take that much. And so maybe from that perspective, you would think that it would make a lot of sense. For the Lakers, LaVine is always going to be kind of involved here. They don't have the assets to go out and get someone like Donovan Mitchell, in my opinion, because they only have like one or two future firsts that they can trade. And one, I don't think they're going to trade Reeves, but even if they did, that's still not probably good enough for plus one or two picks to go out and get someone like Donovan Mitchell, given that there are other teams that are going to be, competing to bring him in. Pascal Siakam is a super interesting one for them, I think, because the fit of him alongside Anthony Davis, one, permanently moves AD to the 5, and two, it's just a really interesting combination to think about. And then, of course, when you add kind of Bron alongside that, that's a gigantic front court, although obviously later career LeBron has been better at the 4 than at the 3, but you can figure that kind of stuff out. Strictly as a talent play, if the Lakers went out and got Siakam and kept Reeves, and it was Reeves, a guy that can shoot and guard, LeBron, Siakam, AD, that's a really interesting group. And it kind of, Siakam kind of fits that mold a little bit of a guy that's just constantly putting pressure, on the paint defensively. That would be an interesting one for me. And again, I don't think it would take a ton because Toronto is going to be super motivated to move Siakam because they don't want to risk him leaving free agency and getting absolutely nothing for him. So their combination of assets, matching salaries and, one or two picks is probably enough, only because of the contract situation. Of course, you have to be confident that Siakam is going to sign in the offseason. But apart from that, kind of where I've landed with the Lakers is that they're unintentionally in a very weird spot, because I had just kind of assumed that there would be a star available that fits really well with their roster. Someone like Kyrie, I thought was always going to be available towards the deadline, but he's barely played for Dallas. So it's like, how are you going to look at trading a guy that like hasn't really played that much? And things have gone well in Dallas this year. They haven't gone poorly. So there's really no incentive for them to look at trading away Kyrie unless we get into some really weird shenanigans with LeBron. The Siakam LaVine fits are cool, but maybe not the best options for them as a team. They don't have enough for Mitchell, and it feels like a team, honestly, like they're not as good, but it feels like LeBron's last Cleveland year, where they just kind of made some moves to make some moves, and it helped, but it wasn't super impactful, right? Like it wasn't star trade stuff. It was like, we're going to swap some role players for some better role players plus some draft compensation, and then we're going to kind of figure it out from there, which is weird because I just had assumed the way they structured stuff and the way things work in the NBA that there would have been a star available for them in the deadline that fits really well. And unless you're a big Zach LaVine guy, it's really difficult to find that player. They need someone like LaVine, and maybe given the fact that it wouldn't take a ton to get him and the fact that LeBron doesn't care about the future contract of Zach LaVine, he's 39 years old, he just wants to win this year, maybe they'll eventually get pushed into doing that. But this potentially to me feels a little bit more like an organizational split here, where you have Darvin Ham over here, you have the front office over here, you have Bron over here, and all these different parties have a different idea of what's better in the long term or in the short term for the Lakers. Bron is always going to push for, we need LaVine, trade the future pick, do this, do that. And the front office did a really good job last year of kind of meeting Bron's needs at the deadline. They got, brought in D'Lo, Vanderbilt, like they made a lot of really, really good changes to help them a lot, while also not completely mortgaging their future. And then Darvin Ham was able to manage that. But this year, this kind of move that they made last year where they brought in all these role players and stuff doesn't feel like enough. They feel like they're in a little bit more of a desperate situation in terms of needing another star alongside Bron. And as Bron continues to get older and he continues to want to chase titles, he's probably going to continue to push more and more and more for what he wants, which in the short term is going to be to add another star. But if you're in a situation like it appears the Lakers are, where none of those guys are really super available, as a front office, do you make a move for someone like LaVine that you don't like the move, but you feel like you have to do something to kind of appease Bron? Or do you just make a couple of smaller moves and just hope that Bron and AD being good enough is enough for you in the postseason? Or, as some people have suggested, do you start considering possible LeBron trade? Now, that's an out of control suggestion. There's like an almost 0% chance that happens, but you really start to go through the possibilities of what is best for the future of the Lakers if LeBron isn't the one calling the shots. It feels like, not just with this Darvin Ham thing, but just in general, we're going to really, really find out who calls the shots here in this organization, right? And it feels like in the past it's definitely been LeBron, but as he gets older and as it becomes more and more clear that a 500 basketball team is very realistic, even if Bron and AD are available and playing well, it feels like the organization might start to take a little bit more control over this. And I know that that's a lot to take away from one Darvin Ham report, but this is just not the season that the Lakers or their fans thought they were going to have. And oftentimes that changes a lot of stuff. Now, at the end of the day, they could make the LaVine trade and it work out perfect. Kyrie could randomly become available. They could go and get Siakam and that work out really well. That's probably the one I'm most interested in, is the possibility of them trading for Siakam. And it could also always work out. Like, the NBA is a crazy place, and we could go, we just saw this with Jonathan Kuminga randomly being like, hey, I don't really want to be in Golden State anymore. Like, we see this stuff all the time where guys seem reasonably happy and then a week later they want to go somewhere else. It's part of what makes the NBA so interesting, and it's part of the reason why the Lakers positioning themselves as a team to make a move at the deadline from a salary perspective always made a ton of sense, because people are, players are always going to want to go to the Lakers. So who knows how it's actually going to work out, but with the Lakers, just truly never know.